The concept of creating a garden and creating a landscape or living with your land is really not to rush, that it is a process. It is never going to be done. It's because nature doesn't want to stand still. And there's so much joy in that. It's like, why would you want to have your family arrive fully grown? The joy in seeing it happen every step along the way is so part of it.
You're listening to the Good Dirt Podcast. This is a place where we dig into the nitty-gritty of sustainable living through food, fashion, and lifestyle.
And we're your hosts, Mary and Emma Kingsley, the mother and daughter founder team of Lady Farmer. We're sowing seeds of slow living through our community platform, events, and online marketplace.
We started this podcast as a means to share the wealth of information and quality conversations that we're having in our world as we dream up and deliver ways for each of us to live into the new paradigm, one that is regenerative, balanced, and whole.
We want to put the microphone in front of the voices that need to be heard the most right now. The farmers, the dreamers, the designers, and the doers.
So come cultivate a better world with us. We're so glad you're here. Now, let's dig in. Hello, Mom.
Hello, good morning.
You have some exciting plans today.
Yeah, today I headed to Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture up in Tarrytown, New York, for a symposium on managing invasive plants without chemicals, right up my alley. I'm really excited.
Yeah, you're so excited about this. You've been talking about it for weeks.
Yes.
And Lady Farmer is a proud sponsor of this event.
Yes.
We're really excited to support it.
Yeah, the full name of the event is Managing Invasives, Mindful Ecological Approaches. And it is hosted by the Perfect Earth Project, which we'll hear more about in just a minute.
Yeah, so I'm not as much in the garden as you are. I don't have as much land to manage. Managing invasives is not something that I do every day or at all, really. So for those like me listening, tell me about why you're so excited about this and interested in this.
Okay, so as our regular listeners will know, for 2 or 3 years now, I think I've been very much into the idea of the restorative landscaping, which is trying to heal the land from the damage done by inputs that really don't belong there and that are really detrimental to the local ecosystem. And this means chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, all of those things. And it also can mean plants that have been brought in from other places that flourish because they don't have the predators to keep them in check. And they take over resources that the native plants need to thrive. And why do we want the native plants to thrive? Because the ecosystem is built around these plants, the insects, the animals, the birds. They are evolved to nourish and be nourished by the plants that have been there a long time. Now, there's all kinds of discussion about this, like, which ones can we tolerate and which ones can we integrate, and how do we even define invasive, since the landscape is always changing.
Yeah.
And so all these are really good questions, very fascinating to me. I've been working on our land, as I said, for 2 or 3 years now to study this question, and I'm far from being an expert at it. I'm just learning every day. I'm out there learning. And I'm doing what I have come to call meadowing in my yard, where we have reduced the mowing so that certain spots can grow wild and we can cultivate the things that are supposed to be there and manage the things that are not. And managing is a big word. And so that is why I'm super interested in this symposium.
So as I mentioned, I'm not in the garden as much, but I really am interested in this topic from a socio-cultural standpoint and kind of like what we value. There's a conversation that we've had on this podcast a while ago, going back to, I believe it was Justin West, that conversation with the landscaping. Also Owen Wormser's conversation, Lawns into Meadows, but kind of thinking about the lawn and where that came from and why we had lawns even in the first place and
Yeah.
what that means. And just visually how it looks to manage your land in this way that we're talking about versus manicuring it and sort of curating it in this other way. I love all the gray area here, how there's not right and wrong necessarily, but there's kind of like everything we talk about on here. It's sort of choose your own value set and your
Yeah.
goals and what you're trying to accomplish. In general, for us, that means being the best stewards to our local ecosystem. And what does that look like? I really love how it looks a lot different from maybe what we're used to. I particularly like that aesthetic. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's just interesting to think about.
Yes, this is where we get into our episode for today. The discussion is very much about all those things you just talked about. And it's obvious that these topics are fascinating to us. And we really enjoyed talking to Edwina von Gal. She's the founder and president of this Perfect Earth Project.
This is the organization that's running the event that you're going to at Stone Barns. And when this episode airs, you will have already been.
Yes.
So hopefully you'll have some things to report back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to add that it is my understanding that it will be recorded and that you can listen to the sessions from their website, which we will give you. So if this really sparks your interest, check it out.
So Edwina von Gal founded Perfect Earth Project in 2013 to promote ecological land care for the health of people, their pets, and the planet. She is principal of her own landscape design firm, and she has been creating landscapes with a focus on simplicity, sustainability, and beauty for both private and public clients all around the world. Her work has been published widely, including New York Times, Vogue, Architectural Digest, and her book, Fresh Cuts, won the Quill and Trowel Award for Garden Writing in 1998. In 2024, she was named one of the top 50 creatives in America by Wallpaper magazine.
Edwina has also served on boards and committees for a number of horticulture organizations, and she's a member of the Native Plant Trust Council. Her awards include the Longhouse Visionary Award from Longhouse Reserve, the New York School of Interior Design's Green Design Award, and Guildhall's Academy of the Arts Lifetime Achievement Award for the Visual Arts. She lectures regularly around the country about nature-based landscape solutions, and we feel so lucky to have her here with us as a guest on The Good Dirt. So here's Edwina von Gal of the Perfect Earth Project.
I am Edwina von Gal, and I'm a landscape designer. I've been a gardener for probably about 60 years. I had my own landscape design firm, and as time went by, morphed into more and more environmentally conscious work, and eventually ended up starting the Perfect Earth Project. We promote nature-based landscaping for the health of people, their pets, and the planet.
Wonderful. So, digging into your background a little bit more, you've been gardening for 60 years, you said.
Well, if you count working in my dad's vegetable garden.
Absolutely.
That's more like 75.
Yeah.
I know. And, ideas around gardening have evolved so much since then. And I think probably even a lot since you started Perfect Earth in 2013. So tell us a little bit about your own evolution as a gardener.
I started out as a hippie mom. Growing organic vegetables, and got interested in gardening and got interested in design. And so eventually opened my own landscape design firm at a time when it was not a competitive field. There were very few people doing it. So in some ways that made it hard, but it also made it easy because not many people were hiring landscape designers, but they only had a few to choose from. I started out doing what everyone was doing at the time, which was growing as many different, unusual, difficult to grow plants as you possibly could. And, badge of honor to grow something that nobody else had. I didn't ever use chemicals in my gardens at home, but didn't really think about what was happening at my clients' properties. Landscaping and gardening at that time was much less of a business than it is now. So it didn't occur to me to be worried about it. It also didn't occur to me to be worried about the environment so much in terms of the impact that any individual garden would have. And it wasn't until I actually left for a job out of the United States that I was working on creating a park for a Museum of Biodiversity in Panama and started looking at native plant communities there, and was told by the local scientific community, who were my advisors on the project, that you couldn't grow native plants without chemicals. And I just couldn't understand that. And so I ultimately started a nonprofit to promote native species reforestation without chemicals on the Azuero Peninsula. It's now totally Panamanian and fledged. But in the meantime, people in the States were saying, why don't you do that here? And I realized more and more people were asking me about gardening without chemicals. And I decided I should do a deeper dive into this.
Around what year was this? What time frame would that?
I started the Azuero Earth Project in Panama in about 2006. We got our 501c3 in 2008. And then I started looking at it in the United States in 2010 and officially launched the Perfect Earth Project in 2013 on Earth Day. I figured I'll remember that.
Yeah, so
That's awesome.
The Perfect Earth organization was a response, sort of a growing curiosity on people's part that they wanted to know about native plants, and I guess because you wanted to teach about it. So that's how that came about.
I can't say there was all that much public interest.
Okay.
For Perfect Earth. It was kind of self-centered. I was curious, and I found a way to support my growing concerns. And by doing so, engaging my clients in the conversation, they stepped into it as well. And then people started finding me, and they were out there. And I found out, oh yeah, there are other people. I'm not alone in this. I discovered that stuff I just didn't know, which is like to the extent of chemical that was being applied to landscapes. And then also how much more harmful they were than I thought.
Yeah. Can you recall who was out there doing it at that time or writing about it? Were you influenced by anybody else doing it or anybody else's research or experience? Or you were just finding your own way?
One group that was doing it was the Wild Ones. Do you remember them?
No.
They're still around. The woman who started it, I was just trying to think of her name earlier. She was very radical. She was really about like, you only plant wild plants, only native plants, really, really emphatic. It was fun to have a conversation with somebody. I was originally mostly worried about the use of chemicals. And then as the biodiversity crisis started to appear, started rolling the native plant movement more into an equal place in our mission.
Can you think of where something really clicked for you, like, I need to do this?
Actually, it was in the dental chair. My dentist said to me, I live by the water and I take care of my own property. I do my own landscaping, and I've been told that I have to buy all these chemicals and put them on my lawn. But because of my proximity to the water, it makes me uncomfortable. So where can I go for information? I told him I would look into it, but then I had this aha moment, which is, it doesn't exist. I have no place for him to go. There really wasn't any place to send him. And so that was it, me thinking, I'm going to have to do this.
Wow.
I have to do this. It has been the rest of my life.
Was it, when you had that realization, was it like an exciting thing, or was it like, oh gosh, I have this responsibility?
It was both. It's like being a parent.
Yeah.
It's extraordinarily exhilarating, incredibly rewarding, and a lot of work, a big responsibility.
Can be daunting. The kind of thing where it's good that you don't know what you don't know going into it.
Exactly. But the good thing is that there are so many people in the field now. And actually, I was just talking to Tim Snyder, who's the new CEO of Homegrown National Park, Doug Talmey's, because it used to be me and Doug on the lecture circuit. So I got to know him. We would be sharing the stage. It was the two of us talking to gardeners, talking to garden clubs, talking to community groups. And it was us. And then Ken Drews, who wrote books and did it. But that was kind of it. And now there's so many. But he's still kind of one of the people that people turn to the most. And so it's a really wonderful conversation now in terms of how can we serve this growing audience? People really want to do something and they're not getting great advice. And we can't get it out there fast enough.
That's really encouraging. How would you say the public, you're saying there's more and more curiosity about it, but on the other hand, is there also more resistance now that it's in the conversation? Do you hear people putting up objections about?
I wouldn't call it so much resistance as opposed to just a difference of a whole differing direction.
Yeah.
Native plants grow wild, invite nature into your place, make decisions that are in concert with nature, see your property as part of your family, really a living thing. And then there's the people who want a landscape that looks like a product, that it just was delivered to them, done. And they don't ever want it to change. The conventional landscape industry is making a great deal of profit delivering those products. And so are a lot of the landscape design industry. It's not complex, And when you get into complexity, a lot of people makes them nervous, especially when that complexity is a living thing. Billions of lives just going crazy in your backyard. It scares people. So there is this whole world of fear around nature. And part of it is hopefully we could redirect it, because this fear of nature is driving people in the wrong direction, which will be, in the worst case scenario, the end of the human species. But at the same time, back to what you said before, what's changed in my design and professional life is that I have a purpose for what I do. Before, I was designing gardens because it was fun. It was a wonderful career. I got to meet great people. I got to be outdoors. I got to make pretty things. But now it's like, oh my gosh, this is something I have to do. And it sounds so like humorous to say I have a higher calling, but what else can I call it? I don't know.
Yeah. Is there anything, since you started Perfect Earth, but I guess this could be throughout your entire gardening landscaping career. What has shifted in your perspective, if anything? For example, have there been certain plants that you at one point would plant generously and then you're like, oh no, I don't want to plant those anymore? Or the opposite? Or are there certain invasive or non-native plants that you've learned are not so bad? What has changed for you?
Well, in terms of plant selections, a lot has changed. I mean, I was one of the people who was on the forefront of introducing grasses. I used to do the designs for Rockefeller Center in their channel gardens. I designed the first grass garden there. And I met Kurt Blumel, and he was growing for Omen van Sweden at the time and producing all of these amazing grasses, ornamental grasses. And I made an entire show of ornamental grasses in Rockefeller Center. That's another story. They hated it. But we got a lot of press in the end, so they were happy. But many of those grasses have since proven to become invasive. And the story of invasives is super interesting because all plants that were introduced as non-fertile, like they said that like Miscanthus sinensis does not set fertile seed.
Yeah.
Well, now the meadow next to me is filled with it. It's flowing in. All these plants were introduced into the trade, which appeared to be sterile, About 20 years is what it seems to take. About 20 years later, they start moving out of our gardens, that they start producing viable seed. So yeah, we didn't know that, and we know that now. So I don't plant them anymore. I wish garden centers weren't selling them anymore. They know perfectly well what's going on, but they're still big business. And if they haven't been declared invasive, they will continue to sell them. Do you have mugwort in your garden?
Gosh, yes.
One of my favorite books is the USDA Weed Guide. It was made for agriculture in the 20s and 30s, and they list mugwort as not producing viable seed.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, we know that's not true anymore.
Oh.
And so I never worried about mugwort. Oh, just rip it out. But suddenly it's a giant issue. The other side of that coin is I don't think there's such a thing as a bad plant. And so I don't really love the militarization or the weaponization of the language around invasives.
Yeah.
And
even the word invasive is kind of harsh.
It is.
Yeah.
So when you say war on invasives, that's a lot of harsh, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it is matters of scale. I mean, Perfect Earth and I, we don't ever recommend the use of chemical herbicides or any herbicides because we feel that it's kind of a cop-out. You can't start a good with a bad, can you? I don't see how.
Yeah.
And so we feel that if people take that easier route, they will always go back to it. So people say, well, you start a meadow with Roundup, just use the glyphosate, and then that's one time. Well, it isn't one time. Mm-hmm. That's the practice you've established for managing invasives in your project, and it will be the process that you will have to follow throughout the life of your project, of your meadow, unless you step away and start over in your thinking and in your practice. And people are doing that. But it's just a very different way. And by doing so, they're finding out what is the better alternative. Because one of the things to my mind about invasives is, yes, they're displacing biodiversity in some landscapes. But at the same time, one of the basic laws of nature is that nature does not accept monocultures, just like it doesn't accept a vacuum. It will change that, just maybe not in the human lifespan, and we work within our lifespan. That's our thinking.
Yeah, I was having a conversation the other day on the podcast with Beth Norcross and Leah Rampey, who have co-authored the book Discovering the Spiritual Wisdom of Trees, which is out this month. And we got into this discussion about the concept of invasives and the word and the use of the language and how it is so very aggressive and harsh, as we've said. And I have thought about it a lot in the several days since that conversation about my own approach to that. Like, you go out there and you feel anger towards this thing, and you expend all this, I don't want to say hatred, but not good energy about these things in your landscape. And we don't know what role these things are playing. And we don't know 20 years or the next generation, how they're going to play out. We do know, or we think we know, how certain things are damaging other species and damaging the landscape. So to me, the more I talk and think about it, the more of a conundrum it is. I guess when I encounter people like you in the Perfect Earth Project with all the different ideas, I guess my role right now, I feel like my role is just to listen and listen deeply, listen when I'm out there in my own landscape and just intuit some guidance or something on where to go on all these things. And that brings up another topic. Like, what do you think about the word rewilding?
It's non-specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't use it myself. Mm-hmm. Part of that is really just a marketing thing. I think that the typical homeowner is a little nervous about the idea of their yard being wild. They don't respond positively to the word wild. But wilding has an amazing following because of Isabella Tree and her wilding books. And there's a lot of very positive stuff. So it's being done in so many different ways and means so many different things. It's such a general term. It could mean pretty much anything. And none of it bad, I don't think.
Yeah. What exactly does it mean? And I think, again, you had this continuum, like rewilding, like leaving the property alone and see what happens. Not wanting to control it at all. Well, then you can get into trouble.
Yeah.
I guess. I think the difference is in like, what are your goals? What are your goals in your own personal landscape project? I'm sure you're familiar with Mary Reynolds, who wrote We Are the Ark. We spoke to her a while back, and she suggests take part of your designated land and you grow food. And so that's a very specific purpose. And you are going to have to do certain things to the land. The other part, you give back to the earth and let her do her thing. That's one approach. And then we spoke with another woman who wrote The Bad Naturalist. She was restoring a mountainside in Virginia.
I saw a story about her.
Paula Wyman of Bad Naturalist had 200 acres she was and is trying to restore. And she tells that story. People's projects are their goals, there's a wide range of that.
Yeah, there's so many different ways you can approach a piece of land that I think are all fine. And I mean, our manifesto basically is to maximize health and minimize harm.
Oh, I like that.
And it's just real simple.
It's simple. It's simple.
So you can, like, whose health, as many life forms as possible. And if I find that a day working in my garden, ripping little weeds out of the ground, little plant lives out of the ground, I think I live with that. And it's okay. Plants are seemingly okay with it. And it allows for other life forms maybe to flourish, including my own. But at the same time, I don't think that I'm doing cumulative harm. I think I'm doing cumulative healing.
Management.
But I call it partnering because I've been looking at all the different words that we use about our relationship to land, and most of them have a power imbalance.
Yeah, they're hierarchical.
And so I don't say land stewardship because it implies that land needs us, which is kind of better off without us in most cases.
It's true.
And so my land is my partner, my life partner.
Oh my goodness. I appreciate that so much. There you go. Yet another idea, perspective, way of thinking about all this. It just never gets old. It's like an ever expanding thing. This sort of rediscovery of our relationship with our land, our earth, and where we live. We have recently spoken with Paul Hawken. He just wrote a book called
to that. He's one of my heroes. He did not let me down. It was great.
And his new book, Carbon, is so beautiful, as you would have heard in the podcast. I was very moved by it. And he says our task is to understand where we live. Just understand it. To your point, Edwina, we go through all these mental gyrations of, we need to manage it. We need to control it. We need to heal it. We need to
save it.
When really, I think what we really just need to understand is that, we're equal partners on this planet, humans and the land. And how are we going to respond to that understanding? Which for me personally, it's kind of a growing understanding. It's not just like, it's more like it's sort of an evolution inside myself. You know what I mean?
It's a process.
Speaking of the gardening industry and the fact that creating gardens means lots of products, and so we have stores and it's big business. It's a huge business nowadays. I don't do it as much, but when I walk into one of these big garden centers and I'm confronted immediately, with all the products to put on, all the fertilizers and the chemicals and the things to control the weeds and all these things, I feel very discouraged and almost kind of hopeless in that this is where most people go to cultivate their relationship with the earth and the land. And this is what they encounter. I don't know the solution would be because, it's a capitalist thing, like those rows and rows and rows of products that are harmful. They're not going to easily stop selling those. So it seems like education is just the biggest thing.
And that is like what you mentioned, what's different now. What's different now is that commodification of the garden world. Like everything else in our society, we bifurcated. We're two very distinct parts of a whole. The conventional landscape industry is, to my mind, based on the model of agriculture. It's an extractive approach. It's what Paul Hawken was saying about the flow of carbon. I thought that was so beautifully put because I never thought about it exactly that way. I call it eat, poop, and die, much less poetic, I suppose, than the flow of carbon. But it's really about disturbing this cycle, right? So we ask people to close the loop on their property, which means that none of your yard matter leaves your property and nothing enters except more plants. You don't buy any products because your land is sufficient to support itself. It always was. As long as you're not doing extractive gardening, which is that you're eating things that your property produced and pooping it somewhere else than where it was born. That's where we've disturbed the flow of carbon, the flow of nutrient, and you do have to put something back. In that's the agricultural extractive model, which we now in the regenerative world is referred to as working lands. And so we've taken on in the, I guess you would call it like the restorative model, this restorative relaxation and recreational model, which is residential or not necessarily parks, is we call living lands. So these are lands from which nothing is extracted, but at the same time, they are being extracted. People are fertilizing and cutting off the growth they've stimulated and sending it to the landfill, which makes no sense, when really it's the food that land was supposed to be growing for all other life forms, and we're not sharing. So if you keep it on your property, the cycle is completed and you don't have to buy anything. It's a little challenge that I like to set to my audience and to Perfect Earth people. Can you do this? Can you work into the design and the management of your property every single thing that your property produces? All your grass clippings can stay in place. Your leaves, we're hearing about that. But what about all the branches and trees and everything? Chanticleer garden, they do these beautiful habitat piles, which they took the idea from Greg Dixter. And they're doing these beautiful habitat piles with all the sticks and things that they gather. And they're weaving them. And then thrushes and wrens and all kinds of animals live in there because it's also filled with insects. And then they decompose back into the earth. But there are all kinds of things you can do with your biomass. And so if we as individuals decide not to buy stuff, we don't have to worry as much about changing laws, because that's a really difficult battle.
I know what you mean. If we take care of our own backyard, literally speaking, we're serving the goal. So I guess one real obvious example of this practice of extraction from the land would be, raking up your leaves in the fall and bagging them and having them picked up on the curb. Rather than just leaving them and letting the life forms within those leaves live and develop, and they're born, they poop, they die, and all that returning back into the soil.
Yeah, so it's all of the things that, because basically before humans disturbed the flow of carbon, or were such an insignificant portion of the life forms, and what we moved around wasn't really going to make any difference. Or you go into forests or any kind of ecosystem where human intervention is minimal, they're self-supporting. The nutrient comes from the plants. It grows, it falls apart, it goes back down, and it supports a number of other life forms and builds the soil biome, and it succeeds. So one of the things I like to think of my relationship with my land is it gets complicated and maybe a little overwhelming for people who are just learning, is the idea of partnered succession. So any piece of land, nature is always working on succession, which in other words, a piece of property is aging always. The way it ages is that the plants that die build the soil. The soil is always trying to produce the later successional plants. So you start with the disturbed area, pioneer plants, moves on to some grasslands, moves on to woodies and then forest. Then some big disturbance happens and it starts all over again. If you don't do anything on your land, it's going to try to head towards woodies.
Yes.
And so you might not want your land to be all trees, because since we took the large herbivores extinct, there hasn't been a predator or a process that maintains sufficient open space for the plants that require that. If we were to just do nothing and allow the entire American land or world to become forest, we would lose all of our open space plants. That's not likely to happen because nature would find ways with fire and storms to create open spaces. But yeah, it's because all of our wild flowers, most of them that are not woodland ephemerals, actually evolved in grasslands, open spaces. Like our prairies would turn to trees if it weren't for fire.
Mary Reynolds speaks about this, about how we sort of have to take on the role of these missing pieces in the system to keep those open landscapes, just as you're saying. So, really good example of that in my own garden is this little elm sapling that's just right where it would not work, where it cannot be. I mean, and I just have to keep taking it out, but it comes back. It is so persistent. I sort of dialogue with it and say, just it won't work for you to be here, so we're going to do this again. So I feel conflicted about it. I think of what Mary Reynolds said, like we have to take on that role or else it would just be another forest. Hopefully I'm creating benefits to the planet and the dirt by keeping things at that other phase.
It's a pest-predator balance.
Okay, thank you for that.
And there's no such thing as a perfect straight line in balance, So the pest population rises and then the predator population rises to meet it. Anytime you change that balance, you're kind of resetting it, so you're kind of stuck with that pest forever. I see that as part of the issue with invasives, that as long as we don't have the patience to wait for the predator to come along, we're continually resetting the clock.
Yeah. So how do you handle mugwort on your land if you have it? Do you have it out there?
Oh, of course. A variety of ways. Always. One way is smothering. I do most of it with smothering. So when I had a big patch of it that moved in, I just cut it real short, covered it with cardboard, put about a foot of wood chips on top, and waited 2 years, and then planted my raspberry crop in there, and it worked real good.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I guess the key there is to go deep enough and to wait long enough.
Yes. You have to deprive it 100% of what it needs.
Speaking of the mugwort, I'm excited. I'm coming to your event in May.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yes. And you have a whole session on mugwort.
We do.
I am really looking forward to that. So maybe this is a good opportunity for you to talk about the event.
So last fall, in November, we did an all-day symposium at Stone Barns in Tarrytown on managing meadows, because we knew that a lot of people were doing things on designing meadows and everything, but then people are stuck with meadows and they're a bit overwhelmed in many cases. And there's been a lot of challenge in our world, the horticultural professional world, of people just not knowing how to take care of a meadow within the means of their client. They're generally often looking at something that is like acres of flower beds in a way. It's really designed not as a meadow, but as a giant flower bed. And that's kind of what expectations had become about meadows. So a lot of the conversation is also about managing expectations. Managing meadows was sold out instantly the moment it went up. Everybody really liked it. And you can find it on our website. We are charging for it to help support Perfect Earth. It's $20 to get the link. At perfectearthproject.org. So anyway, we decided we should do a follow-up for that, since so much of the conversation really, people wanted to hear more about managing specific invasives, was the largest component of managing meadows that people were interested in. So we thought, okay, we'll do one that's just that. So that's May 7th. It's on our website, also under the events page. And the idea will be that we'll have people talking about their experiences, because we feel that's what's really important, is to get the conversation out there. It's about mindful management, doing it without chemicals. We have experts leading the conversation, but we hope there'll be a lively conversation from the floor. And because it's at Stone Barns and the Blue Hill Cafe is catering, we have real good food. We'll also have the geek side of us. There will be an exposition of equipment, all the different kinds of seeders and cutters and things, that the mechanical part of the business. Do you know what a flail mower looks like? Do you know a drill seeder versus a slice seeder? And they'll be there from the team from Stone Barns is going to be there. Elijah Goodwin, who is their director of ecology, is an amazing person. And he'll be leading one of the conversations and talking about what they're doing there.
Yeah.
So one of the primary goals of Perfect Earth that has evolved since I began, probably the biggest thing that has changed, is so many other really great groups are filling the space who are better at certain things than I am. We're each talking about where do our skills lie and how to coordinate, so each person we can sync this in, because this is no time for competition.
Right.
We all have to work really together and reserve resource and be as effective as we can. There's no time to waste. And so what I have is this very long history of gardening knowledge. And what I also know is that everywhere I go, people ask me if I couldn't just come over to their property and or who do I hire? Who can tell me about my property? It's basically like, who can help me meet this partner of mine? How can we be introduced? It's really different from what everybody else is doing very well, which is an online component of providing online resources. We have decided to dedicate a lot of our time to person resources. So we're creating opportunities for people to meet each other, but meet in what we call a therapy session. So I come out also on our website, you can see what we offer in terms of an introductory session, how we do landscape therapy, and how we create community conversations and support groups and therapy groups. So how can you actually try to get your landscape professional to step into it at least a bit? How can you have this conversation with them? We don't really want you to fire them because we don't have anybody else to offer.
Yeah.
And so the companion piece to that is ultimately creating a whole new generation of land care professionals. So there's so many young people coming out of college, high school, or just around who really want to do something outdoors and for the environment. And we'd like to give them the training they need to become this voice of a property instead of the usual noise and poison that arrives on your property. They would be this communicator and provide you with land care that actually engages you in the conversation.
So does Perfect Earth have a training program?
We are doing our first pilot with a local farmer training program this summer. We're looking at opportunities for existing infrastructure rather than trying to build schools ourselves, which does not make sense and would never happen in my lifetime. We're looking at people who are already training in land-based knowledge that is earth-friendly and mindful. There's a wonderful local farmer training program, which we've been talking about this for a few years, and it's finally happening. So we will be providing them with additional curriculum for an alternative career for farmer trainers who might find that farming is not exactly what they can handle or they can't find a farm, but they do not have to go back to their desk job.
Oh, really exciting. Emma, we should put her in touch with Owen Wormser, Lawns to Meadows.
He's a lovely person. And he said something on a podcast that I thought was incredibly beautiful. Maybe it was on yours, when she said, I'm not going to heal the earth will heal us if we give it a chance.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember hearing that from him. I don't know where I heard it from him, but I do know something he did say on our show that has stuck with me is that it's every person's birthright to have experience with the good dirt. Okay, I think it was our good dirt question. I thought, yeah, I just love that idea. But
it's a self-prophecy, sort of.
Yeah, it's like something you have to seek out. You have to realize it's missing.
And it's totally available to you. I mean, I really do think, it probably sounds very entitled for me to say that it's available to everyone, but what's not available to certain people is the ability to see it.
Yeah.
Rikers Island is a prison in New York City known for being difficult. I taught there, and we didn't know what I was going to teach. Just they have a garden, but I wanted to talk about careers in horticulture because I think there's no better thing to be doing with your life. There's so much therapeutic about it. At that time, I was writing a book on flower arranging, and from nature, it's just taking things and learning about plants by looking for them at particular times of the year, understanding them, and having them with you during your day. I started this course with youthful offenders, with the young women. It was winter, so we just went outside and picked stuff coming out of broken concrete. In a crack in the sidewalk is beauty. And we did this whole course on the beauty that is there. And it still makes me really choke up thinking about it because it just worked. Nature talked to them.
Is that an idea you've carried forward into other places, or was this just unique to that one?
There's not a lot of other places like that.
Yeah.
But it informs, of course, my hopes for a school that anybody can come to and step into this place that keeps me going in a really wonderful way.
It also speaks to the idea of this right to have a relationship with beauty and nature that is accessible to everyone. I think to some extent we have to get beyond our fear of sounding tone deaf or privileged when we say things like this, because it's hope for someone out there that thinks that all is lost or whatever. But there's an avenue for you to have a relationship with the earth wherever you are and whatever you're doing. I believe that strongly.
Yeah, but it is my responsibility, our responsibility. Those of us who hear it and see it, we're the voice of it.
Yeah. So what does slow living mean to you, and how are you able to practice it in your daily life, if you are?
Well, I wouldn't say that my life minute to minute is particularly slow, but it really speaks to me in terms of the way I present the concept of creating a garden and creating a landscape or living with your land is really not to rush, that it is a process. It is never going to be done unless it's dead, it's forced into some thing that isn't allowed to change and ends up looking like a really bad facelift. But, it's because nature doesn't want to stand still. And there's so much joy in that. It's like, why would you want to have your family arrive fully grown? The joy in seeing it happen every step along the way is part of it. Is that slow gardening? I guess, that I suggest to people every day is a treat of being there. On one hand, don't be overwhelmed. If we say your garden should be largely natives and it's largely not, one plant at a time. It will happen. You don't have to rip everything out and do it right away. It's about picking each plant for the place it should be, letting the land speak to you, being out there every day if you can, and listening and doing what it's suggesting you might do. Yeah, for the rest of my life, this will be my garden, and I'll do it as I get around to it.
I
It's
love
so
that.
true.
Yeah. It just takes so much pressure off. Just, that permission to just let it be, let it evolve, let time do what it will with it, and we don't have to manipulate it.
It's interesting that you said the word permission, because I hear that more and more when I speak to people. They say, oh, you gave me permission to relax, to be fine with my compost heap looking like a compost heap, or making a habitat pile out of twigs and letting it be. So I'm curious, how did we get away from feeling like we had permission? I wonder.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a lot of cultural expectations about the way things look. And, certainly the historical implications of the lawn and, the status symbol and social media and magazines and gardening magazines and how we think we want things to look. There's a lot of unlearning in that. There's just a ton of giving ourselves permission not to be striving for that.
One of the garden clubs I spoke to, one of the women said to me, we went on this tour and we saw a bunch of gardens that, typically I would think are wonderful. Everything's exactly in place and everything is exactly, and it's all the things that you see in the magazines, and was really great. And then they took us to a series of gardens that are more natural. At first, my response was, wow, what's happening here? This is messy. But she said after a while was people spending time in these gardens and on the tour, I thought back to those first gardens we've seen, and they looked like Hummers, which is like those big hulking vehicles. And I thought, that is so good.
Do you ever come to Washington, D.C.? There's a place you'll want to visit. Hillwood. Marjorie Post.
Dream Merriweather Post.
The famous Post cereal. She was a benefactor of many causes. And this was her last home that she built. It's right in the middle of Washington, D.C., but they have an amazing garden. For that, in her time, it was a little more manicured and everything, but now it's just wonderfully natural and native, and it's just, I just go there and I take bazillions of pictures in every season.
Oh, I would really like to do that, because it's one of the things that I've been talking about. I was advising some work at the National Trust for Historic Properties and trying for them to figure out how they face the future and also respect the past, especially in cases where keeping the past requires heavy inputs of noise and poison. And they felt that also it endangers your volunteers and your workers and the environment. They're struggling with this. What we came up with is that if the person who designed this garden originally was considered a creative force, what would they be doing now?
Yes.
And it sounds like Marjorie Merriweather Post is still pushing the dialogue. That's okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, she's the one who got us freezer food, right? Like, she was always thinking ahead. I don't know about necessarily saving the planet, but that wasn't even in her realm of consciousness then.
No, it's about always thinking creatively, thinking about how do I respond to what is.
We'd love to ask all of our guests, what does the good dirt mean to you?
So Paul Hawkins said, we don't call it dirt.
Yeah.
Lots of people say that.
Yeah, so I'm avoiding that. But to me, it speaks to this idea that It's really important right now that people get really good information. They get the good dirt on what they can do. And everybody can do something.
Yes.
And that is within their capacities, as long as they're given the right information. So it's about communicating. That's what the good dirt means to me, is really great communication and community building.
Oh, that is
So good.
fantastic. I
That's
love
the
that
right
so much.
answer.
I love to say that everybody, just like everybody has the birthright to a relationship with the earth, everybody can make good dirt. Anyway, I think we can kind of wind that up there. But I would like to invite you to say anything else that you feel like we haven't covered, or whatever you would like to leave our listening audience with before we go.
Well, hopefully they might like to check out perfectearthproject.org and see what we're offering. Sign up for our newsletter, because we're on the brink of creating and dropping a whole lot more in terms of information and resources that people can use. One of the things that we know is hard for people is how to talk to their landscaper. So it's not up there yet. Keep checking. When it is, it'll be in our newsletter, is landscaper language. We're building this whole package
That's
information
awesome.
so that don't fire your landscaper. It's not really their fault. There's never been any expectation of them to learn the way, the rest of us plant people, we're a little unique. And we spent our entire lives taking every moment to learn about plants. How can we share that? How can we feed it back to the landscape industry and ask them to toe the line with us, create certain goals, understand why, and then work to meet them? One of the things that's been really rewarding for me is that I have a young guy who has come to garden here, and he's building his land care business because he was referred by someone else I know, and because he wanted to learn. But it's not just him, it's other people that when we've had these conversations and then I hear them, that light bulb goes on. And then I hear them telling the story again to someone else. They start to own it, and they start to be the knowledgeable one. And they start to talk to their other clients about this amazing thing they're doing, and maybe they could do it for them too. They become the knowledge centers, the wise people, and they really love it.
It's like the second generation of the native geeks like us. Although, of course, we all appreciate that generations ago, all the native cultures, that's how they operated.
Relearning, remembering.
We're just remembering all of that. So anyway,
Yeah.
So this is wonderful. We will close it off. We will say thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your time.
So
and
lovely.
Much for asking.
Thank you for tuning in, calling in, and spreading the good dirt. We love hearing from you. You can reach our listener voicemail at 443-459-1950. That's 443-459-1950. You can find this number in our show notes and in our Instagram profile.
This show is produced by Lady Farmer, a slow living lifestyle community, and the original music is composed and performed by John Kingsley.
For more from Lady Farmer, follow us on Instagram at WeAreLadyFarmer. That's We Are Lady Farmer. Or join us online at www.ladyfarmer.com. We'll see you next time on The Good Dirt.
Goodbye.